This is Jake Pozicki with an ACT Science Conflicting Viewpoints question. Now, this question is asking us what researcher 2 meant by using this phrase first order phenomenon. So when we see where researcher 2 talks about first order phenomenons here in the passage, we can see that he or she uses first order phenomenon to describe surprise. And whenever they're talking about surprise, they're talking about it as something that was once thought to indicate metacognition, but it actually is just a first order phenomenon, meaning that it's a mechanism that implies a discrepancy between a creature's current judgments and the reality experiences. It does not necessitate that an animal is aware of its judgments. So basically, researcher 2 is talking about the fact that this first order phenomenon is something that does not imply awareness. It's just a discrepancy between a creature's own judgments and the reality experiences. So, or at least in the case of surprise, that's what it is. So if we're looking back at our answer choices, we can see that answer choice A says it's a basic response that requires no advanced cognitive abilities. That could be true, as researcher 2 is basically saying that basically if you read researcher 2, this whole passage here, it's basically trying to tell you that the markers that many scientists use to measure metacognition are not proficient to prove that there are metacognitive properties in animals. So, and they're giving the example of surprise. So, researcher 2 is trying to argue that most of these measures, while trying to, as researcher 1 would say that they do show metacognitive processes, researcher 2 is saying that they don't. It's just a first order phenomenon. Surprise, for example, is a first order phenomenon. It does not necessitate that an animal is aware of its own judgments, which is a higher cognitive ability. So answer choice 1 could be correct. Answer choice 2, is it a trait or response that demonstrates a high level of cognitive functioning? We see that is not true. If we're reading the passage here, it's actually the opposite. It does not necessitate that an animal is aware of its judgment. So it's choice C, is a response that indicates an animal has experienced surprise. You might, if you were just skimming the passage, you might be tempted to choose this answer choice because it does talk about surprise here in researcher 2's argument. But what you see is that surprise is a first order phenomenon. That doesn't mean that all first order phenomenons indicate surprise. There could be many things that are first order phenomenons, and surprise could just be one of them. So while that might be like a quick click answer, you would be wrong if you chose it. And this choice D is a response that must develop before other more advanced cognitive abilities are allowed to develop. That is something that, if you're reading this, you might think, actually, that makes sense. Like, that explains what's first order. It's something that has to develop first. And you might think that, okay, so they don't have advanced cognitive abilities, so maybe this is something that has to happen first before they can get those. The problem with, and so it seems like it could be a decent answer. The problem is that it's not supported in the passage anymore. And if you don't see any support indicating that it's something that develops and then that there will be other abilities that develop afterwards, if it doesn't say that in the passage, you can't choose it as an answer, because we have to go off of what we think the best explanation for what researcher 2 meant. And the only one that's supported is this answer choice A, which is right here.